Hi, I'm Grace Bryant with Be Whole, Be Happy, helping you to be whole and happy in your relationships, intimacy, and life. Today, we'll talk about a pivotal point in the Eastern traditions, especially the Taoist tradition, which is the balance of yin and yang. I'm sure you've seen the yin and yang symbol, that circle with the kind of wavy line in the middle, and half is black and half is white. Balance of being yin and yang is what we're aiming for. And in practices of awakening and in cultivating more awareness and mindfulness and presence, where we're heading is the ability to sit right on that edge of yin and yang so that we can jump off in either direction when the moment calls for it. In this video, we'll specifically be talking about the difference between being in the flow and going with the flow. And as I'm recording this in 2018, these are both kind of buzzwords, being in the flow and going with the flow. And this specifically relates to the yin side of the yin and yang. Being in the flow is, there's a whole bunch of books that have been written lately about it, is when you're in that state of creativity, of passion, when you're totally in the moment as it's happening, when you're able to respond to things as they come up. A lot of research has been done with musicians being in the flow and with athletes being in the flow. So when the mind, the thinking mind, is completely out of the way, because we're so present, we're so actually in the moment by moment experience of what's happening, that the mind isn't stopping to go, well, should I be concerned about this? Am I worried about this? Here's my story, or making up illusions. Being in the flow it's so simple. It's that experience of just watching a sunrise, or being in nature, or taking a walk in the woods and hearing the birds call and hearing the river, and just allowing all of that, all of those sensations to arise and to fall. So not getting stuck or caught in any of them. And again, this is really what we mean when we say being in the moment or being present. This flow exists all the time as a state of being. So it exists underneath the thinking mind, underneath the rational mind, as the background of consciousness, you could say, the background of awareness. We can do a lot of things to create the conditions of being in the flow. And usually there's a process, a time period of practice. So if you're a musician or an artist, you know there's a period of practice of getting the technique, and then at a certain point you can let go of the technique and be in the artistry. Or if you're an athlete, you practice, and then when it comes time to be in the flow of the game or the play, that you're really in that flow because the technique has become second nature. So being in the flow, we can also cultivate with yoga practices, meditation practices, martial arts, Tai Chi, where we start to cultivate more and more awareness of the body, more and more awareness of the mind, and there's myriad, countless different practices. But we can cultivate the ability to dive into the state of being in the flow. And eventually, it's about surrender. Eventually, it's about not being concerned if this brushstroke looks like that or if this note sounds like this. It's just letting go. It's surrendering. It's jumping off the cliff into the present moment. Going with the flow, on the other hand, has a real feeling of don't rock the boat. I'm just going to wait for life to come. And if something happens, great, and if it doesn't, great. But going with the flow is often a barrier or an obstacle of fear. I'm afraid of what someone might think if I do that. I'm afraid that I might fail. I'm afraid I might do it wrong. So I'm just not going to. And in talking about this balance of yin and yang, this is being out of balance on the yin side, out of balance on the side of passivity or receptivity. So where I'm almost paralyzed in fear and I can't get to the other side. I can't do that action, do that practice, cultivate whatever it takes to get me to jump off and surrender. So going with the flow is not at all being in the flow, because, if I'm walking down a path and I'm in the flow, I'm able to hear that bird call and feel the river and feel the earth under my feet, maybe even feel that subtle vibration of the vitality of the trees, and it all washes over me. It all kind of moves in and out, and I'm able to just stay present in the moment. But going with the flow, things get stuck because I'm afraid of what's going to happen. So I'm not able to even walk up to the cliff enough to consider jumping off. Going with the flow is a state of passivity that isn't a conscious choice. And you might think it's a conscious choice if you're like, no, that's how I like to live my life. I just go with the flow. That's my choice. But there is a lot of subconscious programming that's going on to keep you in that state. There's actually a manipulation happening on a really deep level that the ego or the mind says it's not safe, so we're just going to hang out back here and wait. When we start to find that balance point of the yin and the yang, there's a sense of real empowerment in that. A sense of real empowerment of, I can make this choice. And that's also a big difference. When we're in the flow, we're kind of sitting on the teeter-totter, or I like to think of it as a sailboat. So I can steer the boat, I can pull the strings, I can do what I need to do to adapt to the winds and the tides. But if I'm trying to hold on to the winds and the tides, or if I'm just not even steering the boat at all, we're not going to get very far. I hope this helps and allows you a little bit of letting go or a little bit of stepping forward into what it might be like to be in the flow of life, to be in the present moment, to get yourself to a place of being able to let go and fall into that freedom. Namaste.